I have post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and I'm doing all right. And I want to share with you today my personal experience suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and my process and practices to get from being, well, a shit state to where I am today. So without further ado, it's time to get your shift together.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time to get your shift together. You're listening to On the Path Podcast.
Oh, I like the sound of this.
With your host, Sparv.
Thank you guys for joining me for another episode. Today's a little bit, I don't want to say grim, but it's a bit darker than other ones, and I tossed and turned as to whether I even talk about this yet on the podcast, but no better time than the present, right? So I wanted to talk about my personal experiences with mental illness. It's no surprise to you, probably as a shift worker, that shift workers are at an increased risk of mental health issues or mental illness. This is due to social isolation, lack of sleep, as well as that, it's the amount of trauma that we're unfortunate to be surrounded by pretty regularly. So what can we do to combat it? How can we fortify our minds to protect ourselves from this looming giant? I wanted to share my story today in the hopes that it allows somebody else out there to feel like they themselves can open up, whether that be to a loved one, to a psychologist or doctor, somebody. I really do hope that this allows somebody to open up. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify and you see my eyes darting away from the camera, I'm sorry. I'm trying to do my best to look straight down the camera, but I'm looking after the girls and they're both asleep, so I've got to keep my eyes on the monitor. So I apologize in advance if you see my eyes darting off. But hey, like I said, I'm a real person. I'm a shift worker and I'm a dad, and I'm trying to get this thing going, this On the Path podcast. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's where most of the content is getting put out at the moment. I'm really enjoying it today. Anyway, back to it. I've been a police officer for just shy of a decade now. And in that time, I've seen some incredible, incredible things. Feats of heroism and terror and trauma beyond your wildest imagination. It's a roller coaster ride. I tell you what, though, I've met the best people in my life through this line of work. Really incredible people doing incredible things. One of my earliest traumatic memories on the job was very young in the job, and I had to go to a car crash. It was a double fatality. Someone had driven into oncoming traffic intentionally and sadly killed two people. It was terrible. And I remember driving home that night, getting into bed, and just marveling at the human's ability for being shit. I just couldn't believe that. And that was my first taste. It didn't haunt me too long. Certain things will stick with you from an event like that. The sound of silence for that in this instance, I just remember at the scene, and it was just so quiet, eerily quiet, and it's tragic. I'm terribly sorry to the families of those who lost loved ones that day. I remember going to an address on Christmas Day. Christmas has always been massive in my family. We just love it. We love celebrating. We love love. And I love doing that for my girls, just filling the house with love. I was called to an address. Someone was carrying on like a pork chop. Got to the front door, and I could see through the screen door that there was just flour, like baking flour, fucking everywhere. It was everywhere. And I could hear these kids joyfully playing, just screaming with laughter. And this lady comes to the door and she is just off of her face on drugs. And she's screaming out the door saying that it's her fault that the kids don't have any Christmas presents this year because she'd spent all of her money on meth. It was surprising for two reasons. One, at that point, again, very early in my career, I'd never heard someone be so frank about using drugs like that. I thought that was bizarre. But two, I just felt so terrible. You just can't choose where you're born. Some people are dealt a really shit card, and that sucks. And there's no way around that. It just fucking sucks, and it isn't fair. Don't know why that, of all the, I've seen some terrible things, but that one really sticks with me. Kids are just so vulnerable, and yeah, it just sucks. Fast forward to a few years ago now, and I was fortunate enough to win a spot at the Joint Anti-Child Exploitation Team. As a part of this team, we assisted investigations worldwide. We saved kids. We saved kids worldwide. There's no easy way to put it. That's what we did. We saved them from horror. And as a part of my role there, I was exposed to seeing these horrors on a daily basis. All in the name of getting a result and saving kids. I don't regret it for a single second. The people that work there still today, those people are superheroes. There's no one on earth quite like those men and women that are in that office and in our other offices around the world working day in, day out to save kids. It's God's work. There's nothing like it. It took me until I had my first daughter to realize that I'd probably seen enough at that point. I was catching up with a friend who had previously worked there and had left before it became an issue to him. And we were having a conversation about my time up there, and I was talking about how prolific the crime type is and how messed up that is. And that I think that I made some ridiculous statement about how many of that type of offender would live in this country. It was ridiculous. It was way out there. And he just pulled me aside later in the day. He didn't make a public deal out of it. Just when we had a moment quiet, and he just said, "Hey, I just want you to know that number that you said, that's really out there, man. It's not the case. It's not true. You do realize that, don't you?" And I originally tried to defend it. I said, no, that's what I think. That's what I believe. I'm there. I see it. I know how much is happening. He said, "No, mate, it's not the case. When was the last time you checked in with the police psych?" And the answer was I hadn't. I hadn't for a very long time. He said, "Well, maybe just go and book yourself in, have a chat, see how things are." Fair dinkum, I did not think I had a problem. I thought I was right as rain. I was happy to go to work, happy to stay late, happy to get up at stupid o'clock to get into work quickly for a hot job, take a plane somewhere, whatever it was. I'm in. I'm totally in. But I took his advice and I went and saw the police psychologist. He was a top bloke, a really great guy. I don't know what I expected. I think, I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't what I got. I thought it would be prying, to find out what I'd seen, or trying to relate to the feelings I had, in the way of, I know how you feel. And that would just elicit a response like, well, you fucking don't, because you haven't seen what I've seen. But it wasn't that. It wasn't that at all. It was really friendly. It was just a chat. He really disarmed me, which allowed me to open up when he asked a couple of questions about what's it like being a dad now? You've just become a dad. How's that going? I've been a dad for about 3 months at this point. Have you noticed anything creeping from work into your home life? And the answer was yes. I hadn't realized. I said that I wasn't changing my daughter's diapers. I said that I wasn't bathing her. That I was extremely uncomfortable with her screaming. Just couldn't be around it. And I broke down in the office right there and then. I broke down. And that was kind of the first step to my recovery, if you will. And I think I got in early. I think that the black cloud that is post-traumatic stress had only just started coming over the horizon. And I'm really grateful for the police psychologist's work to get to me early enough and get me referred to another psychologist where I began my healing process. So I made the hard decision to leave the Joint Anti-Child Exploitation team and return to my previous posting. Coincidentally, I went downhill pretty quickly. I started having night terrors, nightmares. I had these terrible visions at night that would stop me from sleeping. Paranoid's not the word, but I'm always vigilant anyway. And any police that are listening, you're probably the same. But there's levels to this, and fuck, I was way over vigilant. I would see people in the shops. I would look at them, think about how they reminded me of someone that I'd done a job on, and get angry. I wouldn't express that anger, but I could feel it inside. I still wasn't comfortable in changing nappies, bathing, and I hated the sound of screams. It's funny, even talking about this now, you can probably see compared to my other videos, my body language, feel really tight through the chest, short of breath. It still affects me, but I'm much better. Anyway, so I started experiencing all of this. I had to leave the position I was in. I had to move on from there due to the risk of exposure to, let's just call it, bad stuff. And yeah, I began seeing another psychologist that I was referred to. If I wasn't already like so lucky to have such an amazing police psychologist, the lady that I was teed up with, she just changed my life. She really changed my life. Just the kindest person. So fortunate to have someone like that to work with. Again, disarming, not prying, didn't want to, tell me more about what made you sad. Tell me more about what you saw. There was none of that. I've been seeing her for years now, and not once has she ever said, tell me what you saw. Which is funny. Some people that might be exactly what they need, but her ability to kind of work out what I need and what I didn't, pretty uncanny. So we were using a method of treatment called acceptance commitment therapy, or ACT. Now, the idea of acceptance commitment therapy is, it works for me. It worked for me. There's a couple of polarizing schools of thought. You've got acceptance commitment therapy, and you've got cognitive behavioral therapy. So those are your two schools of thought, and I went down with ACT. ACT it's not running away from the thoughts. It's not changing what they are. It's a really honest, raw review of what you're experiencing. So for me, that was when these visions would come, and boy, they were always there. Instead of trying to block them out and pretend like they weren't there, I would address them. I would have a little internal kind of reflection. Why am I thinking this? Well, I'm thinking this because of my experiences at the Joint Anti-Child Exploitation team. And how's it making you physically feel? Like I mentioned before, get that tightness of chest, a dry throat, sweaty palms, getting really hot. How am I feeling emotionally? Angry, scared, sad. my dad has this thing that he likes to say, you got to name it to tame it. And that's a lot like acceptance commitment therapy. You've got to name it to tame it. So by naming these feelings, what am I feeling when this horrible vision comes into my mind? What is it that I'm feeling? By putting a name on it, by addressing it, it loses power. I really, really mean it. For me anyway. Again, this is purely my own personal experience. But it really worked. I was able to address this shit that I was seeing, and it lost its power over me. And slowly but surely, the visions, they just stopped coming. I haven't had a bad flashback in a long time. A long time. And I'm on it straight away. If one comes, I'm just on it. Why am I feeling this way? How am I feeling? And by addressing it, it just fucking goes away. For me anyway, it just goes away. Now I wouldn't say I'm cured by any means. But I am the best dad I could possibly be. I'm a great dad. I'm a great husband. And for that first 3 months, I guess I was a little bit absent. And that's going to live with me forever. And that's the hardest thing. Even talking about it now, I'm trying to not get choked up. I won't get that 3 months back again. And that sucks. That sucks. It was a sacrifice that I made. And I don't regret the sacrifice. My actions, along with my team's actions, we directly, because of our actions, saved children. So, I am beyond grateful to be able to have done that. But these are my scars. These are my scars. I still hate the sound of kids screaming. I fucking hate it. And I do my best. I try to accept it, and I reason with it, and it's not as bad as it used to be, but it's still there. It still lingers. That's my scar. I'm still extra vigilant. That's not going to change. I think that it's not a bad thing. I don't think my vigilance crosses a line of insanity. I think it's reasonable. I think all parents should be vigilant in this day and age. I'm so much better. So much better. It's been years now since my diagnosis. It's been a couple of years. Ugh, and I am so much better. Sorry. It is still hard to talk about. What's also hard to talk about is the amount of colleagues that I have that I know have experienced trauma in the workplace that are affected by it, but aren't willing to do anything to make living with that trauma any better. I don't think it's about not having a mental illness or scars. I don't think that we should be thinking about eliminating those feelings altogether as the goal. I don't think that's reasonable. I live with this post-traumatic stress now. It is, like I said, it is my scar. It is my battle wound, if you will. And it doesn't hinder me anymore, but it's still there. I've lost multiple friends in this line of work. And I really wish, particularly men, but not limited to men, I really wish we would be more willing to open up and speak about how we feel. Speak with loved ones, speak with someone at work, go and seek some professional help. Do a Google, find someone that's decent. You know who the best person is to speak to. My wife was incredibly supportive through the whole thing. She never made me feel guilty for not wanting or being able to change the girls. Never made me feel guilty at all. But I will say, speaking to someone completely external to the whole thing, it was a lot easier. That's not a sign of weakness. It's just a bit easier. I'm not going to get my wife to do a fucking colonoscopy on me, right? I'm going to go to the doctor. So when it comes to mental health, maybe that's where you need to go. Maybe you need to go and seek someone externally. A safe place that you can just talk. It doesn't mean you have to talk about what you've seen. It might just be about talking about how you feel. Maybe you get some practical ways in which you can start to manage the trauma that you've experienced. And it doesn't even have to be trauma. For some of you out there who are listening, trauma isn't necessarily a part of your daily work life. But for you, it might just be that you're suffering from lower mental health because of shift work lifestyle, because of the fact that you're not sleeping, because you've been socially isolated from your family and friends due to night shift. All of these things can have a dramatic effect on our mental health. That's my story. I'm doing a lot better now. I'm back in my previous workplace. I look forward to the opportunity to speak with anybody about my own experience with post-traumatic stress disorder. I feel like I'm far enough on the other side to be able to talk about it. I hope to be a safe place for anyone at my work or beyond to speak to. I'm not a professional, whatever, mental health clinician or nurse or whatever they're called, but I'm a safe place that you can just reach out if you just want to talk. If you're worried about someone, a friend, a colleague, don't be afraid to reach out and ask, are you okay? You know, we have all those campaigns, Are You Okay Day. I think the one for us is triple Are You Okay? Maybe it's double Are You Okay? Are You Okay only works, in my experience, if it's kind of private. In a group environment, addressing someone after a traumatic incident. Hey, Jimmy, how you feeling after that fucked up job? Jimmy's going to say he's okay. It's pretty unlikely Jimmy's going to say, oh, that really messed me up and I am not feeling that great. That's probably a hot point for you managers. When the moment comes and you have the opportunity in a non-threatening environment, then ask, hey, that was a really messed up job that you went to by the sounds. I'm really sorry you had to go and see that. Are you doing all right? It can be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be a formal thing, and yeah, that doesn't work for me. It might work for you, but I think for me, when I've been checking on colleagues and friends, it's been privately, and I've always followed it up a week later, a few days later. Hey buddy, I know that we chatted the other day. I just wanted to double check, see how you're doing. If you need anything, like at all, just reach out to me. Be that person. Be that guy that pulled me aside and said, hey, that stuff you're saying is kind of a bit messed up. Because if he didn't, I wouldn't have got onto this path. And that black cloud, it would have turned into a thunderstorm and it would have ruined me. Instead, I stand on the other side. A beacon of hope, if you will. You know, I really do hope to be able to put a spotlight on post-traumatic stress, on mental illness, and say you can get better. You can help prevent someone from getting caught in that thunderstorm if you're proactive and if you're kind, which is what I hope all of you are. And that's my personal experience with post-traumatic stress. It was a little bit harder than I expected. I would be lying if I told you this was one take. It was not. I said it all once and just felt like I verbal diarrheaed the whole thing. Went back and, well, here we are now. I've re-recorded it. Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. If you think someone could take something out of listening to this, please do flick it onto them. Like I mentioned at the beginning, subscribe to my channel, YouTube where it's all at. Spotify is a great place to listen to my podcast. You can also watch my podcast on Spotify. So if that's more your jam, then give us a follow. I do appreciate that. And that's it for today. Next week's episode, I'm going to talk about in a bit more depth what worked for me, strategies that I continue to use. I'm going to discuss some mindfulness tips, how mindfulness can be incorporated into your day-to-day life as a shift worker. Hot tip, mindfulness isn't wearing an orange robe in the Nepalese mountains in silence. That's not mindfulness. We can snack on it all through the day, every day, no matter your profession. So make sure you tune into next week's episode for that. As always, guys, it's time to get your shift together. Good night.